Let's tell the tragic and dark origin story of Bulletproof. We see Zandel Randolph and his parents absolutely freaking out on him because they think he's been pretending to be bulletproof. Hanging his head in shame, he tells them to calm down and he's going to explain everything. See, Zandel had a twin brother named Tyrone, and he always grew up in his shadow because Tyrone was an absolute genius. And while the brothers were twins, sure, they couldn't have been any more vastly different. By the time they get to college, they kind of started to lose touch. He graduated early. He became one of the world's most renowned and well-respected scientists. Zandel, on the other hand, was doing his own thing. Tyrone would then go on to become the leading geneticist in his field. He even picked up a military contract. He was insanely successful. Despite all of that, he did have one weakness. He was absolutely obsessed with superpowers. He would spend every waking minute of every hour observing them, studying them, superheroes, supervillains, trying to figure out how they got their powers and what created them. And more importantly, how he could recreate them and use them himself. Zandel never really realized how far gone his brother was, and one night visiting him, he sadly found out. All his brother could talk about was how close he had become to being able to replicate superpowers, and that's the last thing that Zandel remembered. Until he woke up hours later, restrained to a table and more scared than he's ever been. Tyrone told Zandel that he had never done anything with his life, and his sacrifice is going to be a noble one. He tells him it was like he was born for this purpose. He had a perfect genetic double to test his process on. Tyrone had everything he needed. He had figured out how to give people superpowers, and he had a guinea pig. But when he fired up the machine, it didn't exactly go as planned. It turned out the process worked. It gave Zandel superpowers. The machine malfunctioned and exploded, and it killed Tyrone in the process. Zandel was distraught. Despite all that he had done, he had just lost his brother. He watched him die in front of him, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't think anyone would believe him that Tyrone was really gone because his remains were destroyed, so he just pretended it didn't happen. Their mom and dad loved Tyrone so much more than him, and he couldn't bear to tell them the truth. So he pretended to be him. At that point, Tyrone had spent so much time away from his parents, it wasn't that hard to convince them. Years later, he learned to control his powers, to hone them, how to use them, and, he never did anything formal, but he would save some lives and do good whenever he thought it was necessary. It took some time before he ever became bulletproof and realized just how much good he could do with these powers. He knew it would be more believable to their mom and dad if he told them that Tyrone was the one that had superpowers, and that would give a built-in excuse for why he was always busy and couldn't ever come around. He lived two separate lives, but he also saw the difference, the real difference of how his mom and dad treated him as opposed to his brother. When Zandel was pretending to be Tyrone, he finally had the love and the care and the time that his parents never would give him before. It was all that he ever wanted. But unfortunately, this heartbreaking story doesn't convince his parents of anything. They call him a liar and say that if his brother is dead, it's because he killed him, because he was always jealous of him. With tears in his eyes, he's begging his mom and dad to listen, that he's telling them the truth, but they tell him that they're calling the police, and they're going to see him fry for this.